kind of format. I'll do a quick introduction, then we'll pass across to Keith, and we'll go through there. If you do have any questions, then please put them in the chat, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. Similarly, if you've got any questions afterwards, then please put them in the chat on Wild Winchester. Or I think Keith actually put his email address in some of the stuff on the Peregrine diaries and what have you on the cathedral. So you can contact Keith in any number of ways. Right, I shall pass across now. Thanks, Keith.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Simon, and good evening, everybody. If you've just joined us, we're going to give the talk tonight about the Peregrines in Winchester, slight variation on the talk that you may have seen me give in the past. If you've just joined us, you've just missed the fact that we're watching them live. And what I was explaining is that the camera on the internet's a little bit blurred on the second camera. We're trying to get that fixed, but the camera is good, so it should be good in a few days. So yes, let me tell you all about our wonderful peregrines. And here they are. This is a photograph I took 2 days ago. And we've got Winnie on the nest there. She's the female, and Chester over on the wall. They are the peregrines that have been in Winchester now since at least 2011, and probably earlier than that. And they would both have been at least 2 years old at that time because they were nesting. And they've nested on the cathedral for, I think this is their 4th year. And they're a wonderful birds. It's fantastic having them around. And I thought I'd just start by telling you a little bit about them. This was a photograph I took 2 days ago as I noticed that Winnie jumped off the eggs and she's looking down, and you can see that right-hand egg is just cracking there. She will have been aware that these eggs were about to hatch because the chicks actually call from inside the egg about a day or two before they hatch. It's a way of letting her know that they're coming out, make sure she doesn't desert them. And she doesn't help them. She doesn't actually break them open or anything. That's something they do. She doesn't want to harm them in any way, but she is watching them there. And she's got a brood patch. Now, this is not Winnie, this is another peregrine, but you can see here the wind has blown the feathers apart on the breast, and you can see that bare skin. This brood patch is an area of bare skin, basically, which becomes bare during the breeding season. The feathers fall out. She doesn't get cold because she does have mane feathers that cover that. But this is her brood patch, and she puts that bare skin against the eggs when she's incubating them for the full month that she has to do that. And that keeps them particularly warm because, of course, feathers themselves are insulators. The heat from her body wouldn't pass out to the eggs if she didn't have that bare skin. Chester also has a brood patch, but his is a lot smaller because male peregrines don't do very much of the incubation. On birds where only the male does the incubation, there are a few species like that, and then the male has the brood patch, and if they do half each, then they have the same size each. Anyway, that's the brood patch if you hear me talking about it. And you'll notice that when Winnie goes above the egg, she sort of spreads out her breast feathers. You can't see the brood patch, but that's what she's putting over those young chicks. So yesterday morning, I was absolutely delighted to wake up to find a couple of chicks, and there is one of them. The other one, I think, is just sat underneath, and that was at about 7:30 in the morning. I posted that on the Wild Winchester site, and I don't think I've ever had a photograph liked by 500 people before, so that was rather nice. And as someone put, you know, straight out of the egg and already ready for the camera. Really good looking bird. And today, this is a photograph I took of Winnie delicately feeding tiny pieces of meat to this chick. There's actually a dead starling there as well, you can see just next to the chicks. So I thought I'd just tell you about the Winchester story because it's a good story about how we got our birds. So basically, this is Winnie, and she is a very, very attractive female peregrine. She really is a stunner. And I took that photograph of her in 2018 when we were ringing her chicks. And here's Chester. He's quite a lot more shy and bashful. You don't see Chester very much. And of course, like all male peregrines, he's smaller than the female and a lot quieter. So Winnie and Chester, named by the volunteers at the cathedral. I thought it's a good name, actually, better than Perry, which is what they usually get them called. They're great parents. They're always getting rid of unwanted guests. Here we have a buzzard over the cathedral being sent on its way in no uncertain terms last summer. But back in 2011, we first became aware of them nesting in Winchester on this building, which you may recall was the police headquarters in Romsey Road. Now that was the place they nested that year and indeed the year after, but I know they were having trouble because we knew they'd failed to rear any chicks in 1 year. And we thought it was probably because they were nesting in a gully, which they seemed to go for, and the gully would have ended up having water in it on a rainy day. But there they are, up on the side of the police HQ. Has to be the safest place, I think, in Hampshire to nest. No one's going to climb up there to steal their eggs or their chicks. So what we did is we went up, we had to be harnessed up because it's a pretty high place. And here is the first box we put up. And you can see we put very, very fine horticultural grit inside. So they've got something in which to rest the eggs carefully. You can see the gully just to the right-hand side where they originally would have been nesting. And you can see it's already wet. So hopeless place to nest. So they've got a roof there. We're not allowed to put a roof in the cathedral. Also, if we put a roof, you wouldn't be able to see them. So I think actually in the wild, they don't get a roof. So we decided not to put a roof on it. And here are the chicks, the first chicks we had that we knew of in Winchester. And these are fantastic beasts. Here is the this bulge on the throat here is the crop. Actually, it's not the throat, it's the breast. The crop is basically an adaptation on birds of prey, so they can take in a lot of food where maybe they gorge themselves basically until not only are they full, but the crop is full as well. So it's like a storage space for the next load of food they're going to digest. And once the crop is full, they can't take anymore. And they just sort of fall over and let the others take their place. So here's a couple of their chicks. These are Winnie and Chester's chicks. And then in 2017, the police HQ was demolished, and in its place, I think we've got some buildings going up now. And we knew that they were going to have to look for a new place to nest. And we'd already worked out that on the north side of the cathedral, just by the rose window and this gully again, that was where they were really interested. We saw them there all the time, and we had meetings with the cathedral to try and agree something. Unfortunately, we weren't able to negotiate a deal at that point. A lot of building work going on in the cathedral at that time, and they didn't really want to mess around with peregrines. But there's the gully that we were fairly certain they were going to nest in. Indeed, they did. And very sadly, that's the first year in 2017 when I'm afraid they did get washed by water as I predicted. So we got a tray in the next year, and this is in March in 2018. That's when the beast from the east came. So during that time, we put the tray in, and that's what it looks like. They nested on it 2 weeks later. So it was really, really pleasing. And here are their first chicks, we put them into a cardboard box just to simply keep them a bit under control. At that age, when they've got a bit of a personality, they actually will run around a bit, and we don't want them running around up in the gully because it means we've got to go and get them. And we have to be harnessed up as well, which is another thing which makes it more complicated. We put rings on their legs. So when you see a peregrine, have a look, see if it's got an orange ring on it. It might be a blue ring, which would mean it would come from another part of the country, perhaps Devon or Cornwall or around Bristol, or maybe a green or a black ring from Sussex. And we put a metal ring on as well, which has got a lot more detail about them, but it means we can actually track them in future years. And you can see this is another place. This is not actually at the cathedral, the length of the legs. And you can see we've put the rings on there. And in future years, if we see a peregrine, good chance it'll stick its leg up because they spend a lot of their time preening and messing around, cleaning the beak or cleaning the feet. And you can see the ring number, and we can then track that bird and know where they've gone. And indeed, we know that one of our birds from 2018, TBF, he is on the left there as he was in 2019. And here he is on the right-hand side. that was a photograph taken in January this year in Farnham in Surrey, where he was living on St Andrew's Church. Now, he's left there. He then turned up in Romsey, had a look at Romsey Abbey, obviously thought the church was a bit small for him. Let's face it, he's come from a cathedral, so he wants to get back to something quite big. So we haven't seen him since, but he will obviously turn up somewhere at some point. So here are the chicks on the nesting tray. The tray allows water to go underneath it. So if there is a real downpour, these birds are safe from getting wet. And once they're out of the nest, around about the beginning of June, you'll find them out on the sides of the cathedral. Should be some good opportunities to see them there. And these are young birds. You can tell they're young because they've got vertical stripes on the breast. The adults have bars going across, so they're very different. And of course, the young birds are kind of brownish in color and the adults are gray. So a quick run through as to what the peregrine year is like. Now, early March, they start to get the nest ready. We've already gone through, or I have to be honest, the verger very kindly cleans up the mess from the year before, but they get their nest ready. They make a little dent. Now, it's quite funny watching them do this. Well, first of all, they display to each other. So this is the display. They go into the box or onto the tray and they bow to each other. I expect you've seen that at times. It's a beautiful display, and that's absolutely going to guarantee there's going to be eggs and mating coming up later. And they make quite a lot of noise when they do that too. But here's the making of the nest. This is another location. This is not Winchester, but you may have seen either of them actually going down and basically pushing their breast into the gravel and then pushing forward with their feet. And by doing that, they make this little indentation. So anyway, then we have the first egg being laid. So in 2019, it was 16th of March, 2020, it was 17th of March, and this year it was the 10th of March. 4 eggs in that picture, but last year, of course, it was 5 eggs. It's 4 eggs again this year. Winnie did surprise us a bit because she, having laid the first egg, she then left it, I think, 5 days to put the second egg down. And I was getting a lot of emails from people asking what was going on. I don't really know. It did go quite cold. And I wonder if maybe she thought, you know, maybe she'd slow it down a bit. But also we wondered if she maybe didn't have enough calcium to make the egg, because the eggshell has to be made. And sometimes birds lay eggs too early and they just flop. Or it could have been that she sensed she was laying too early and maybe wanted to get back on track. Anyway, we are earlier than last year, of course, still. Here they are displaying to each other again. They're doing that right by where the nest tray is with at least one chick in it. This display goes on throughout the season, actually. They're very good at doing that, but they don't do it so much once they've got chicks. It's just too much to be doing. And of course, before and during the time they've got chicks, they still mate. So bizarrely, they still mate even though they have got chicks, which is a bit of a surprise, but that's something that birds of prey do. This is a photograph again from another site, but you can see here a chick, at least one chick, probably I think 2 or 3 underneath the bird, and 1 unhatched egg. Now we've got an unhatched egg at the moment, but I think that'll be hatched by tomorrow. But sometimes, as in this case, you can see the egg has been pushed out from the front. And that bird has given up incubating that egg. It's basically decided, I've got enough chicks, I don't need any more. In Winnie's case, she goes for the full set every year. So I'm confident she will actually hatch all of her chicks. So around about a normal time, 14th of May, you'd have bundles of chicks there looking like that. It'll be a little earlier, more like I suppose the 8th of May this year. They'll be looking like that. And then again, I suppose in our case this year, it'll be something like 17th, 18th of May. The chicks will be off the tray running around. Now you'll notice there, we don't have any kind of step ladder for them to get back onto the tray. That was a bit of a design fault. We were so keen that they didn't get wet. We didn't think about making a little step ladder for them. So the step ladder's in place now, which they can use, and it works. Otherwise, I've got to go up there and put them back in. So there they are. And here they are early June, but in this case, it'll be end of May, sitting up, able to fly by this stage. And this is an interesting time because they do get into trouble. They're being fed a lot. That's Winnie coming in with food from one of the chicks. And this is a photo of last year's class of 5 chicks. And there's Winnie trying her best to cover them. Rather difficult, but they're all under there. And there they are, queuing up to be fed. I do notice that she, like any bird, is sort of, and probably like any parent, is attracted to the one that's noisiest. So the one that's demanding the most food gets fed. And the one that's quiet doesn't get fed. So it's probably like us, any family we've been in. If you're the smallest in the family, you'll find you have to fight to get the attention. Well, what happens with these, as I mentioned, the crop fills up, they get very full, and then they sort of fall over, move out the way, and everybody gets fed in the end. And this is last year's set. Pretty miserable looking bunch. Lots of racing pigeon legs around there, I'm afraid. Sorry about that. If you like racing pigeons, they do too. And yes, as I said, they do get into trouble. So this is a photograph taken last year where one of the chicks came tumbling down the side of the building and ended up on the ground underneath. There it is. And that had to be picked up by one of the workmen at the cathedral, I think 3 times over a period of just over an hour. To put it back in the nest tray, and then off it went again and did the same thing again. Eventually it worked out what it had to do. They're very demanding at this point, and here is a photograph from, I think, last year, might have been the year before. Here's Winnie bringing in more food, but no amount of food is enough for these chicks, it seems. I think this is Chester, because this is a female chick on the left. Now, I mentioned that females are bigger than males. Well, this is his daughter, and she's bigger than he is already, and she's only about 5 weeks old. So yeah, no wonder he's timid. The chicks do a lot of practice play and fighting. It's not severe fighting, it's just designed to really hone their skills of being able to fly and maneuver in the sky. So just a few facts then about peregrines, and I'll just run through this quickly, and what would be good would be to get to answer some of your questions. Barry, incidentally, I don't know if you've got the questions to hand that we had sent in advance. I don't have it
I have them,
on my screen
yeah,
at the moment, but if you're able to get it, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, I've got them.
For the end. Right, so males, as you can see from this, are a lot smaller than females. So even the largest male is smaller than the smallest female. And in many cases, you know, there's a big difference. You've got the laying dates there, although that is moving forward, as we can see with this year, 10th of March rather, really early. Climate change probably affecting that to some degree. 3 to 4 eggs normally, and they incubate them for a month. The birds then take about another 6 or 7 weeks to fledge, depending on how it's going. And sadly, they don't have a very good success rate in their first year. So you can imagine that baby peregrines are a bit like Red Arrow's pilots in their first year. They've got to get things right, and you know, they make mistakes, they fly into buildings, all kinds of stuff happen. We had one of our chicks from Winchester ended up going to Heathrow Airport, crashed into a plane and died. So yeah, there are, I'm afraid, lots of challenges for them, and of course they've got to be good at catching food as well. So, but they will stay with their parents right up until about Christmas time. So they've got 6 months to get this practice in, but if they don't crack it by that time, the chances are they may not survive. So at least half of them die in their first year. They breed at 2 years old, but quite often it's a bit later than that. And if they can actually survive, then 21 years is the oldest one that we know of at the moment. I mentioned the size difference. There's also a bit of a color difference in many of the birds, although in the case of Winnie and Chester, I think they almost look identical. I quite often don't know which one I'm looking at. I have to wait until they're both there. But here's a pair. This is a split photo. This is Beauty and Archer. They're from the Midlands. And you can see Beauty on the left. She's got a much more rufous color to her breast, whereas Archer is brilliantly white. And I think the thing I always look at with peregrines is I look at the eye in the head, and I think if you look at the size of the eye and the head of the male on the right, it just looks that much bigger. He looks sort of like cuddly, toy-like, whereas she really doesn't. You know, you wouldn't want to cuddle that animal on the left. It probably wouldn't thank you. They are the fastest animal in the world, flying, if they wish to, at over 200 miles an hour. And they do that by putting their wings back really far and becoming like a missile. This is one coming down at full speed towards something which it's going to attack. It could be a pigeon, but I mean, it could be something smaller as well. And at the last moment before they hit that, they will put their legs forward, and this is what happens. They grab the prey. Quite often, I imagine the bird is knocked out straight away, the victim. I don't think that many of them know much about it. We've seen a big increase in peregrines in Hampshire from 1993, when they first started nesting with just one pair down at Fawley Power Station, actually on the coast, up to around 20 pairs in each of the last 5 years or so. And I think that's about the number we're going to have going forward, because there aren't that many places really available for them to nest. Well, where do they nest? So I mentioned Fawley Power Station. Well, this is coming down this year, that chimney, but they do nest on that chimney. I'm involved in discussions with the people developing the site, and they're very clear they're not going to bring the chimney down until the peregrines have finished nesting this year. We're also going to make sure there aren't any peregrines on the chimney when it's blown up. But other places, this is an office block in Southampton. There's quite a few office blocks now with peregrines nesting on them. This is a huge crane in Southampton Container Port, where a pair of peregrines nest up the top in a box that we put there for them. It's a fascinating nest because it's actually a mobile nest. It's the bottom part of the crane, the yellow part is actually a train, and it goes along the tracks, and therefore it's in a different place each day. So I think it's the only mobile nest in the country. And there's quite a few nests on pylons now, particularly the type on the right-hand side, where those insulators come together in the middle. So a box shape there, and you can see there's a peregrine looking out. So very good of National Grid to have all these wonderful peregrine nest boxes all over the county for us, really good. And they nest on buildings, and of course they nest in some most amazing places. So this is actually in Chicago. This is a nest that's quite well known, where the gentleman who lives there has basically baby peregrines looking at him when he's getting dressed in the morning. And here we've got some eggs from a typical nest. I just thought I'd put those up for you. And I wanted to thank various people who've helped me, some of them indeed maybe on this call, for their help in putting together some of the photographs which I've used. Much appreciated. A quick word about HOS. The Hampshire Ornithological Society has organised this talk tonight. Membership, briefly, is £16. But we'd be very happy to
Nigel, can you just mute yourself,
make you a couple of offers. First one is we have this lovely Hampshire Bird Atlas, which we published a few years ago. It's a beautiful book packed with photographs. Normally 35, we brought the price down to 25 just recently. And we've just brought down the cost of last year's bird report, which was $16.25, and that's now 10. What I'm going to say is, if you'd like to join HOS, and if you're not a member already, it is £16, but if you do, we'll let you have one of those atlases for £15 instead of 25 plus postage. So make a note if you're interested in any of that in Brian Coates's email address at the bottom. I'll just leave it on for a second or two, because he'd be very happy to discuss that with you if you'd like to join. But we were happy to give you the talk anyway, because we love our peregrines in Winchester. And what I will do now is I will say, I'm very happy to take any questions, as Barry's got some that have been submitted in advance. And also, I know we've got some on the chat. So Barry, do you want to fire away with the ones that have been sent in to you?
Yeah, sure, Keith. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. A real nice mixture of questions. And yeah, as you say, a few have come in during the course of the talk tonight as well. So in no particular order, let's start with specific ones around Winnie. You've talked obviously about their age and how long they've been around. So how many chicks have they reared, or how many eggs and therefore how many chicks have they reared so far?
What, since 2011?
Correct. Do we know?
Oh, Right, hang on, let's do this.
Sorry.
2, 3, you can add them up. 3, 2, 3, I think 4, then they had a blank year, then they had another blank year, then they had 3, I think, and then 4 and 5. What's that, about 20, 25?
24, I make that 24. I'm sure someone
Yeah, I mean, they
correct me,
do,
but, I make it about 24.
yeah, quite a lot.
That's great. Okay, thanks for that. And I think you covered it in one your point when you said you find it difficult sometimes to differentiate between Winnie and Chester, but other than when you see them together, any other clues on how to differentiate other than when they are physically together and just see the size difference?
Behavior. Winnie is quite aggressive, although not as aggressive as some female peregrines, and Chester is not aggressive at all. So he comes in quietly, and she's the one who's pretty aggressive.
Okay, good.
I think Nigel's unmuted himself.
Yeah. Thanks, Nigel. Right, that's where we. So where typically, and you've mentioned some of the territories some of our fledglings go off to, but generally, do we generally know where they head off to, or what's
well, the ones we've seen since have been from Winchester. As I say, we've only had a few that we've resighted, but from Hampshire generally. Some of them go to Dorset. I think a few go to Sussex. We've had them in Surrey, Cambridge. One went to Holland, so it's usually within about 50 miles, but it could be more. And we've had birds arrive here that have come from quite a lot from Sussex. We seem to get a lot of the Chichester Cathedral birds. We've had birds from Salisbury Cathedral. Yeah, so it's about 50 miles generally, I find they go.
Okay.
Which is quite a good idea, because it means you don't end up nesting with your mum and dad.
It's kind of desirable not to, I would have thought. But Winnie and Chester, I mean, what kind of territory? Do we have a sense of how wide their territories?
Oh, their territory. Sorry,
yeah. No. Separate. Kind of separate question. So
got it. Territory. Right. Okay. So the territory where they nest is about 1.5 miles in any direction. So any peregrine coming in that area is going to be sent on its way. Maybe a bit less than that. And so therefore you won't get any peregrine nesting less than 1.5 miles away. The hunting territory could be quite big, so that could be 10 miles. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they went out to the downs in order to find food, as far away as Alresford, or further west towards Salisbury, that way.
Okay, that's great.
Just going back to the question about mating with your mum and dad. Quick story. It's a true story. Down in Bath, they have a pair where the female was on eggs. The male died. And that's happened to us as well. We had that happen to one of our nests. So we don't know what happened, but he just died, or he disappeared. And she was on her own. And her son from the previous year, who was not yet old enough to breed, he came along and he realized somehow what was going on, started feeding her chicks. So he became the surrogate father that year, and then became her partner the next year when he was old enough to nest, and he still is her partner after 10 years. I know another case where, this is incredible, where a female was on the eggs, the male died, a new male arrived and was accepted by the female. She had eggs. Bizarrely, she died. And then another female came in. So we basically had completely two foster parents who took over these eggs or chicks. I think that's only ever happened once. It's incredible.
And clearly Winnie and Chester have keep their nest loyal, but is that the general norm for peregrines, that they pretty much always return to the same nest?
They always go back to the same place, unless they've had a bad experience, in which case they might move somewhere else. But I know a quarry, for example, where I'm fairly certain their eggs have been taken a couple of times because there's a tree above the nest hole and somebody probably scales down. So we've cut down the tree. We've actually moved the hole as well to somewhere else, and they've gone straight to the new hole, which is great.
That's great. Okay. switching away from cathedrals where and the like, which clearly they like some of the structures that we've built as humans. Any tips on trying to find or spot peregrines in the wild? Is it really difficult?
It's not difficult to find peregrines in the wild. We've got about 20 pairs, plus about 5 pairs that aren't actually nesting. If you're looking for nests, then pylons are a good place to look because they're pretty obvious when they're sitting on those. They're noisy as well. They make a lot of noise when they've got chicks. If you're just looking for peregrines generally, then on the coast, somewhere like Keyhaven or Farlington or around Titchfield on the coast, there's peregrines patrolling up and down there the whole time because there are lots of waders and they like eating waders, and they will overlap. So although, as I say, the hunting territory is quite large, so you could have peregrines from about 3 different places all hunting in the same area.
And a supplementary on the feeding one, Keith. I mean, frequency. I mean, are they literally feeding, catching whatever the prey might be all day long? I mean, what is a typical? Is there a typical frequency?
About 5 times a day,
okay,
bringing in food, but then more frequent as the chicks get bigger. So you'll notice once these chicks are growing fast, they'll be bringing in food probably once an hour.
Right. And you made a reference to racing pigeons. I think starlings also in the course of the presentation, being sensitive to that it is a sensitive topic. But do they have a preferred prey? Is it the racing pigeon?
Racing pigeons, I think, they like, because you could imagine it. The average street pigeon in Winchester is a bit sort of lardy anyway, whereas racing pigeons very fit, designed to fly thousands of miles. Also, racing pigeons come over in a flock quite often, and you can see them from a couple of miles away if you're a peregrine. So you just fly out, attack the flock. You've got a choice of maybe 50 birds, so you have a go at one of them. So that's probably why they get them. The other thing is that the local Winchester pigeons, they don't really get up very high. So, I mean, you can see sometimes a pigeon will almost sit next to the peregrines on the ledge, and you think they're having a bit of a laugh, but they know that peregrines can't run, they can only fly. So they're safe. So yeah, Winchester pigeons don't really get above about 100 feet, do they, normally off the ground? So they're not going to get caught.
And switching to nests, I mean, you've covered quite a bit, Keith, in terms of nests, but I mean, it's not a traditional bird's nest or even a raptor's nest, birds of prey's nest. But so thoughts on why they build the structures or use the structures they do, as opposed to actually building a more traditional nest?
Well, birds of prey generally, they're really a real mixture. Some of them will build a stick nest. In the case of peregrines, they'll take over an old crow nest. So there are a few crow nests around. There's one in Sussex, there's one in Wiltshire, where they've taken over the nest. They just aren't wired to build a nest. Because they've always nested on cliffs and mountains. In the Arctic, they nest on the ground. And we have a couple of nests in Hampshire now, actually, which are on the ground too. And they're the only nests on the ground in the country, which is a real kind of change from what they've done in Britain before. They're very good at adapting themselves. I mean, they never nested on buildings until about 30, 40 years ago. And now, of course, they're nesting on loads of buildings. And as a result, the population's got a lot bigger.
And there were some great pictures of the fledglings and obviously the rigging, and you described that. But how protective of the parents as you're going through that process, and how do you deal with the parents whilst you're up there ringing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So they're very different in America. In America, if you go to a peregrine nest, you probably have to take a riot shield with you and a helmet because you're going to get attacked. They're much more aggressive, and I've been told that basically because many more of our birds have been shot over the years. So those that maybe came close in the past have been shot and killed. And therefore what we've got is the ones that are more cautious and less aggressive. But we never get attacked. I mean, Winnie will come along, she'll make a noise at us, and then she'll be off. She won't sort of attack us. She'll just come within about 20 feet or so and fly around. And then afterwards, what I do notice is in a place like Winchester, where it's a busy place, lots of people around, she'll be a bit unsettled for about half an hour because she'll see everybody else walking around in Winchester and think they're going to come up play around with her chicks as well. We don't do it lightly, actually. We would only do it if we could get a benefit for the bird out of it. And actually, by getting a better understanding of what peregrines do and where they go and how long they live for, we're able to hopefully improve matters for them. If there wasn't a benefit for the bird, we wouldn't bother.
Sure. And the numbers you shared, Keith, in terms of general, not specific to Winnie and Chester, the general numbers looks a positive story in terms of the number of peregrines, particularly in Hampshire.
Yeah.
What's your view on what's under that and behind that success? Better protection. What's changed in a positive way? We obviously hear so much bad news about impact on birds, but on the face of it, peregrines, particularly in Peregrine in Hampshire, is a good story. It's a good news story. But what would you put that down to?
Well, for about 100 plus years, peregrines have suffered. Initially, their eggs were collected by people in Victorian times. Then, during the Second World War, they were killed under order from the government because they were intercepting homing pigeons that were carrying secret messages from people stationed in Europe during the war. Having killed all of those birds on the south coast, then very powerful insecticides were developed, which improved our agriculture enormously, but it actually resulted in residues getting into birds, including the peregrines. Their eggshells became thin. They also died anyway. And as a result, the population plummeted. So in the 1960s, there were about 350 pairs. And now, because those things have all changed, we now have about 2,000 pairs. So they never nested in Hampshire. They started nesting in 1993 as the population recovered, and they went back to nest in places like the Isle of Wight and Sussex and Dorset, where they already did nest on the cliffs. So it's a good situation. It's not good everywhere. If you look in Scotland, the numbers there are declining at the moment. They're less than they were 10 years ago. Not entirely sure why. Persecution of them to some extent by people who don't like birds of prey will be a factor. I think also the number of the seabirds, smaller seabirds, terns, for example, in Scotland are declining in number. And because that's their prey, therefore the peregrines have got fewer birds to prey upon. Perhaps there's also an issue with something like mercury in the fish, which go through the seabirds, which then go through to the peregrines. But that's a story still to be discovered properly. So it could be they're suffering from the state of our seas.
The population that we have closer to home, Keith, Hampshire and surrounding counties, do you foresee that continuing to increase, or do we think there is a kind of a plateau point? Is there a view on that?
Well, I think we're getting close to the plateau. There are definitely some places where they still could nest, but if you look at the distribution of them, they're very dense along the coast. So around Southampton, there's about 4 or 5 pairs. Going further west, there's about another 4 or 5 pairs, and going east, there's a few down towards Portsmouth. Inland, we've got a pair in Basingstoke, we've got a pair in Andover, but they're thinner in number. So there is definitely space for them to expand, but I don't know that there's enough food for them in those areas, because I think they would have moved into them in bigger numbers already if they were going to. Okay.
And competition, not from man, this question is, what about other raptors, red kites, for example? As the increasing number of red kites, which obviously is another good news story, do they have any impact on peregrines, the number of peregrines?
Only in that they cause a bit of trouble around the nest. They fly around above, they annoy the peregrines. Same with buzzards. Winnie and Chester brought down a buzzard last year, ended up on the ground. I think they brought a kite down as well, and they both recovered. There are quite a few cases where buzzards have been killed, and mainly by being just knocked out of the sky. But there's no effect the other way around. So buzzards not having an impact on the peregrines.
Okay, good. Now, one quick one popped in. Someone's down in Cornwall wondering if you've got any knowledge of peregrine population down in the West Country.
Yeah, there's a lot of peregrines down in the West Country traditionally, although at the moment, for some reason, their numbers are declining. So that was the stronghold of peregrines in England in the 1960s and early 70s. So we're not quite sure what's going on, but there's been quite a decline. So perhaps again, driven by the availability of seabirds, which some of them would feed on rather than pigeons. But they're on the coast basically, and on a few of the pylons. I know there's quite a few questions in the chat box. I don't know if you're looking at that as well.
I think I've picked up most, Keith.
Brilliant.
We'll just go through. Yeah, no, I've been picking up those as we've been going through this evening. So I've been feeding those through. There's one there about government funding. I mean, is there any government funding that's provided specific to support the growth in peregrine numbers? Is it given its status?
No, there's no government funding for peregrines of any kind. There are a number of voluntary schemes like the one we sort of set up in Hampshire about 10 years ago to produce nest boxes. There's government protection though. They are protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. They get the full protection of that. So if anybody damages a peregrine or affects a peregrine nest, then they are liable to be prosecuted.
Anne?
Oh.
Anne?
Okay.
Here's yours. Can you bring
Hello,
it to
Anne. You think your microphone's on?
I've just muted Anne. Sorry, Anne.
We ought to unmute everybody in a minute and let them go nuts.
Yeah. A couple more, Keith, and I'm happy to do that. If you're happy for me to do that, defer to Simon as well.
I've got lots of questions for everyone in the background because I'm seeing lots of people eating food. A few people with really interesting ceilings, people who've been going out into the garden, all sorts of stuff. So, yeah, we could have an hour just on that.
We could.
Just before we do that, Simon, there are a couple more. At what age typically do peregrines stop breeding, Keith? I mean, you gave the kind of oldest peregrine that known.
What age they stop breeding? I don't know the answer to that because I think they basically die and that's the end of it. So the oldest one is 21. That bird was still breeding. So yeah, they go on forever. I did see a question come through from someone about divorce.
Yes.
And that does happen. So we've got some interesting peregrines in Hampshire. There's a female peregrine with a colouring on, so we know exactly who she is. She's a London female. And she came along and partnered up with a male down on the docks at Southampton. She had a couple of years with him. She then left him for the male up the road, 1.5 miles away, of course, as I said, who was the one nesting on the crane. She had a year with him. Then she went back to the original male. But in the middle of June, when she was basically supposed to be looking after her chicks, of which she had 4, she was actually seen on camera, because we have cameras in some of these nests, displaying to the other male, the one she'd had the previous year, back in his box. So we don't really know what was going on there. I mean, peregrines are quite complicated. So for example, female peregrines, just before they lay the eggs, even though, I mean, for all I know, Winnie may well have been away with other males because female peregrines will mate with random males that might be in the area simply because they want to mix up and get extra genes into their eggs. Mixing up the gene pool. So it's quite regular that female peregrines will mate with, you know, random single males that are passing through the area. It's probably going to ruin everyone's dinner.
There you go. I think there's only one that I've not addressed yet, Keith, and actually back to nests actually and nesting in trees. Given what you've shared, not very common, I would have thought, but example.
They don't do it very often, no. As I say, there's a nest in Sussex, I know, on a tree, and I think it's in the middle of the countryside basically, so they go for the tallest thing around them, and it's a part of Sussex where there are no pylons, so I guess it was either don't nest or nest in a tree. Where they nest on the coast, it's extraordinary really, because they're actually just 3 meters up from the high water mark, so they're likely to get washed if you're not careful.
Yeah. Someone just posted asking a question about a specific case further north in terms of dead peregrine. I assume they do. We do have knowledge of that. They do get persecuted still, despite.
They definitely get persecuted. We've had some of our birds in Hampshire shot. We had a bird shot in the New Forest a few years ago. We've had some of our birds from Hampshire move elsewhere. One of the very first ones we did, it got as far as Cambridge and was killed. One source of dead peregrines, I'm afraid, is actually female peregrines attacking each other. So there are females that will be out looking for a new nest. There was a case, for example, in Norfolk where, or Cambridge, I forget now, where the female peregrine who arrived at a site, she killed the female who was the female there. She then started to try and kill, in fact, she killed 2 of her chicks. the people at the site at a cathedral realized what was going on, so they grabbed the other chicks, brought them in, and that was her attempt at taking over the site. Every spring we get female peregrines that have been attacked. We had 2, if not 3 this spring. So there are a lot of territorial disputes, and I think it's because it's a growing population, so there are lots of spare young females trying to muscle in on these territories.
Right. To see that, and for those less squeamish, and I've just seen a question around where can you see a peregrine, one of our Winchester peregrines, actually catching prey? Is there a? And again, you've talked about how wide their feeding territory is, but if one was interested in actually seeing one of the 2 of them actually in action, any tips?
Well, I guess it's going to be mostly for Winnie. It'll be quite high up because she'll be attacking probably racing pigeons or pigeons generally, or magpies and things. Chester will be going for smaller birds. So I mean, Chester brought in that starling today, which I'm sure for him is quite a big bird, but you know, Winnie wouldn't even look at the starling. They do catch things around the cathedral. Unfortunate story, but one poor house martin that was caught by, I think it was caught by Chester. And he didn't kill it, he just caught it, and then he had the babies flying around after him, and he was training them to catch a house martin. So at a crucial point, he let the house martin go so that the babies, the chicks, could fly after and catch it, and they didn't. So he then went and caught the house martin again, did another circuit, did the same thing all over again, released the house martin. Yet again, they didn't catch it. So he just caught it and ate it. So sorry if you like house martins, because they are rather nice, but they've got to do it with something. I mean, better if they did it with a starling maybe, but yeah.
Okay. I think that's probably, well, the last question just coming about breeding age, but I think you've covered the fact that from knowledge, they kind of breed up to the point where they unfortunately expire. So I think that probably covers.
There was a question a bit further up actually, Barry, about whether Chester hides food for Winnie.
Okay, I missed that one. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Simon.
Yeah. Oh, it says here, Keith is quieter than Simon was. Is that about my volume?
That was quite a while back, Keith.
That might be a comment about me, Keith.
It's my, oh yeah, okay. Well, I hope my volume's loud enough. Right, okay. Forgotten what the question was now. What was the question?
Hiding food.
Hiding food, yeah. Well, I'm not exactly sure where they hide it because I'm not there, but I definitely noticed earlier today, Winnie had something on the nest. She's very good at taking away bodies, and she took it off and she put it somewhere. So I imagine it's probably around the corner of the gully somewhere. I expect the verger knows because he has to go and get a shovel and clear it all up every year. I'll ask him.
Simon, unless you've spotted any, I think you've pretty much covered all the questions, Keith, and also the ones that were posted in advance. So I did defer to Simon whether he wants to open up for other types of questions, but otherwise, Simon, I'll hand back to you to...
Yeah. Again, if anyone's got any questions quickly that they want to unmute themselves and come on, otherwise, we can tie up, but Keith's available for the next 10 minutes, so
yeah,
make use of it. No, people are walking off instead.
Yes, can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
Do you know what the sight is like of a peregrine at night? Is it the same at night as in the daytime?
Okay. I don't know if I know what their sight is like. Do you mind just turning your mic? That's great. I don't know what their sight is like at night compared to daytime. I do know that their daytime eyesight is fantastic because they can see something like 3 miles. They can see a bird 3 miles away. They definitely do have quite good eyesight at night because they fly off sometimes. And the other thing they do is they catch birds at night. So we get woodcock coming over in October. They come in from Scandinavia, quite a lot of them, or Russia. And as they fly over, peregrines catch them. Now they do that over cities. So I imagine that, that the light coming up from our cities is reflecting off the woodcock, and therefore they're able to see them. So I sort of slightly fudged that because I don't know the answer, but I know they definitely have good enough eyesight to be able to go and get woodcock out of the sky in the middle of the night. So I imagine it's pretty good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You win a prize for something that Keith didn't fully know the answer to.
through.
Any more?
There might be other prizes that I just haven't revealed.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've read that in the early weeks, you know, when the chicks are small, Chester does the hunting, and then Winnie starts later on when they're a bit older. So, but whenever they feed, it seems that she turns up with the food. So we wondered how they do the handover. You know, if he's caught
Yeah.
it, and then
So
she
that's a good point. Basically, yes. So because Chester is small, he catches small prey like the starlings, which is what they want right now because they want tiny bits of food. And what I've noticed is that he does, you know, dump it somewhere, and you see Winnie. He calls. Winnie comes off the nest. She then comes back with the food, feeds the chicks, and then she goes off and dumps it somewhere else. So yeah, he's bringing the food in. I don't know where he puts it. It must be somewhere nearby. And then when they are quite big, the chicks, then both of them will be hunting, and of course Winnie will be bringing in bigger food than Chester. And that's basically the same with all birds of prey. They're all, the females are bigger than the males, even very slightly. For example, buzzards, the females are very slightly bigger. But in a lot of birds of prey, the female is a lot bigger than the male.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Any more? I could quickly see if I can get the camera up again. What?
That'd be a nice way to finish, Keith, if that's possible.
Yeah, let's see if I can work out how to do that though.
Put yourself under pressure on that one.
Yeah, I've just actually managed to lose. Here we are. I'll get the camera back up. Where is it? I've stopped sharing, so I need to share again, don't I?
You do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'll be watching, going, "Oh, look at that!
I will.
Just brought this in. Yeah, the fourth chick's hatched, and everything else is going on, and we're all watching you."
I'm just trying to work out how to get the internet. I should have thought about this before I actually started offering to do it. Oh, here we go. Hang on, I'm doing it. I don't know what you're seeing at the moment.
Just you still. You're not sharing.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just getting it up. I will put the camera on live. And for the benefit of anybody who wasn't at the beginning, this is the live feed from the camera. It is absolutely fantastic quality, but unfortunately the internet connection doesn't show it as such at the moment. We're trying to fix that. So any second now, I'm going to have it on my screen. Here we go. Okay, share screen. Here we go. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, there you are, Keith. It's there.
Well, Winnie's had enough of my talk, that's for sure. And she's fast asleep. Well, actually not quite fast asleep. What peregrines generally do is they shut one eye and they keep the other one open. And when they shut the left eye, they close down the right-hand part of the brain. And when they shut the right eye, they close down the left-hand part of the brain. So it's kind of a half and half thing. Although I have to say, she looks like she's well and truly out for the count there. But that's a very good, it's a beautiful image. And then, you know, I was just showing the guys earlier that I can zoom it in. It's a very good camera, and I just hope we can get the focus sorted out on it for the internet. It's actually a streaming problem. That's the problem with it.
Great.
Well, if you're expecting an action-packed bit of video with Winnie.
Winnie's not playing. Winnie,
absolutely, that's dreadful. She was quite active earlier.
What do they say? You should never, you never perform with animals or something, isn't it, Keith? So there's something.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, thank you very much for all coming along today. It's been fun talking to you. I changed that talk around a little bit just to give you more about the Winchester story. If you do want to know more on the, oh, here she goes, she's waking up just in time. If you do want to know more about peregrines, then do drop me an email. You'll find my email address on the Winchester Cathedral blog page for the peregrines, and also you can find me on Wild Winchester. So here she is. She's now awake and quite alert.
It's almost as if she knew you were wrapping up, Keith.
Yeah, come on, stand up. No, she's not going to. Busy preening.
Okay. Simon, I don't know if you wanted to
I
close.
just wanted to say thank you, really. Obviously, we got loads of messages saying how much they've enjoyed the talk, and I think everyone has. Again, we really appreciate your time, both Keith and Barry coming along, giving this to us for free. So, yeah, really appreciate it. And again, I can only recommend, all Keith's HOS stuff as well. So if you do want to join up with that, anyone who hasn't joined Wild Winchester, please come along and join us as well. And hopefully we'll have something more from Keith in a few months' time again. In the meantime, keep an eye out on the birds, because as they grow bigger, then there's lots more to see on the webcam. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just
And
a final comment. We will post tonight's talk on the HOS website. So if anyone fancies watching it again, it should be there hopefully by tomorrow. So anyway, just a quick plug that anyone wants to see it again, it'll be there hopefully from tomorrow.
good stuff. And tomorrow morning, I think there will be 4 chicks, I hope. So that's not a prediction necessarily, but it should be the case.
Keith's guaranteeing it.
Yeah. 4 chicks.
You've
or
got
your
his
money back.
email if they don't turn up.
Good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks very
thanks
much,
all.
everybody. Good to see
Take
you.
care.
all.
Thank you very much, Keith. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers, Kev. Thanks, mate.